Welcome to the Sports Card Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Big Ken. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on a streaming service, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. You'll be notified whenever I drop any new content. And if you're not already subscribed on YouTube, head over there. Please subscribe. Appreciate it. Welcome and thanks for being here. Happy Thursday. It is another collab episode this week with Sportscard Therapist. Um, we jumped in last minute. We did a live, and we're going to put this up as this week's episode. And we're going to try to get back on doing it, doing a collab episode every 2 weeks. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Had a lot of fun doing it. So without further ado, here we go.
All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode, another collab episode between myself, Rob, the Sports Card Therapist, and Big Ken from Sports Card Lessons. Ken, how are you doing, my friend?
I am doing well, Rob. How are you doing?
Good, man. Good. It's I'm not trying to, beat this subject to death, but I feel like I really have that post-national glow. And I'm not saying I'm glowing. But I feel like I have that post-national I'm still on kind of like a high from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel the same way, but when I came home, that national was completely different for the both of us. So I felt like I worked myself to the bone, out there. So when I came home, I needed time to relax, just regroup, and now I feel like I have that glow, right? But I didn't come home with the glow. I came home with that, beaten up look.
Yeah, and listen, I think between the national hangover from being exhausted, between uh, you know, traveling and all that good stuff. It's jet lag, not sleeping in your own bed for however many nights you were there. You were there for what, 5 or 6 nights?
Yeah, yeah, I was there Wednesday, got there or very early Wednesday morning, and I came home Monday morning. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
and not to mention our room was like a dorm room. It was the hangout. It was we were eating deep dish pizza in there.
eating deep dish at 1 a.m. Our fridge was stacked. We even got, I know I called for a grocery delivery, which is crazy because I call for a grocery delivery. I don't think I've ever used Instacart before. And it's like I ended up having to place 2 separate orders at the same exact time because I forgot one and it said that I could go in and edit it. But when I tried to edit it, it just basically had me place a whole new order. And I think I spent like $200 on Instacart, but almost none of the items were available. So I don't even know if I ever got credited back for that or what. They gave me no substitutions, no credit. So, I was ordering us cases of water to bring over to the National because they were price gouging. I mean, which I guess you kind of expect at a big event they have to make their money somewhere, but it was like some of this stuff was, it was ridiculous. So, but yeah. So I'm feeling I got through the national hangover, and now I'm kind of feeling that glow just when it comes to the hobby in general. It's like when I look at the hobby and I think about the hobby, it's like it has like a nice rose gold filter on it. It's like all is well, nothing can go wrong kind of thing.
Yeah, and it feels that way too. There was nothing about, that 5, 6 days out there, nothing about that show that would even hint that there's any problems in the hobby, that the hobby is not alive and well. So, coming back from that and being part of that, it's just so exciting, just feel like and I think that promotes that glow, right? That promotes when you're coming home and you're just like, all right, I'm so excited. What's next? Right? What am I doing? What's my new direction? What am I doing? And it's exciting. It's exciting to feel that way. I can remember, last year coming home and feeling that way, and the market starting to dip, and people like, the sky is falling type thing. People were getting down about the hobby and the market of the hobby, and it could happen this year, but I just don't think it will. I just don't think. I think we're even in a better place this year than we were last year.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as like comps and stuff, I don't know if the values of cards are in a better place than they were a year ago, but I think last year at this time it still kind of felt like you were trying to catch a falling knife. You know what I mean? Like it kind of felt like when is this going to stop? When are things going to level out? When are they going to bottom out? And I think I think to an extent it does feel like things have kind of bottomed out a little bit, and people are, myself included, are not looking at values as much, and don't get me wrong, I look at values, of course, because I do want to know the values of my collection, right? But also because I'm always buying and always adding cards to my collection. So of course I need to I need to have my finger on the pulse of exactly what card prices are doing. But I agree with you. There is a better feeling, at least for me, than there was after the Atlantic City National, just in regards to like, oh, what are the cards going to do? When's this going to stop? When's the free fall going to end? It kind of feels like, okay, now, at least for me, I think I am more focused on the cards themselves than I am just like the market.
Hmm. You know what was really kind of cool too, which was much different than last year, was listening to the content when I came home this year, and even including, our wolf pack, listening to all their content. A lot of people talking about finding their grail cards or going out there and finding the card they wanted, and openly admitting, hey, I probably overpaid for it, but it was the card I wanted. It wasn't like, oh, the comps were this and I walked away from it, and I regret doing that and all this stuff. It was like people were just, and I included, I did the same thing. They I had the option to buy a card that I talked about before we went out there. I never thought that I would find out there. And it wasn't the identical card. It was one step down, but it was still a very big card for me. And the deal was made very easy. And in my mind, I'm like, even if I had to pay another 100 or 200 or whatever, I was still going home with that card. And I think you had the same situation with you when once you saw this card, that you may or may not want to talk about, but once you saw your card, you were like, I'm going home with this card. It's just a matter of, what it's going to take to bring it home. So I just thought that was really cool, listening to that content, versus last year it was all about the prices. It was about, oh, this was too much and the dealers were too high, and there was a lot of complaining about comps and prices last year, where this year I really didn't hear much of that at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I think you've kind of echoed my point, I think, a little bit, with people feeling like, you know what, I don't have to focus as much on prices and as much as on comps and as much on the market. Because even last year, even people that were buying strictly for their collection, um, it's hard to spend money on things that are just continuing to go down in value, right?
Mm.
And I could tell you one thing, I think, when it comes to my primary collecting is vintage. And last year at this time, vintage was still incredibly stable. It was still very steady. It didn't have that steep dip and decline the way that most modern, super modern, and everything else kind of had, right? Like vintage seemed very stable. However, I know in the back of my mind, and I think in the back of a lot of vintage collectors' mind, it was like, well, we know that vintage cards are not bulletproof when it comes to the economy, when it comes to the market, when it comes to all this stuff. Now, vintage didn't have the run up that certain modern had, so it wasn't going to have the free fall that certain modern had. However, vintage was going to go down, and vintage has gone down a little bit. So even with that, you don't want to overpay. So, it feels good. I know for me, it feels good. I've said it many times on my show that when I see the market going down and I see comps continuing to drop, for me, I'm like, yes, because I am thinking long term. I have taken a step back out of, setting up, and so I'm not setting up as much. I'm not buying and selling as much stuff. I'm really just kind of curating my collection. So for me, down prices are welcomed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I PC a lot of the women's soccer, and they just got knocked out of the World Cup, so I'm kind of sitting back too. I want to see where those prices go, if those prices go down, because that's a lane that worked very well for me, out at the National. So I'm hoping more moving forward to some more shows that, there's still going to be a lane for that. The women's sports, the soccer, the WNBA. I'm just hoping there's going to be more of a lane for that, so I can keep going at that, because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed all the people I met that are in that space, and yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully that does continue for you. And I know you had mentioned shows. So what what shows are coming up that you're doing? Because I know East Coast National is just a couple of weeks away.
Yep.
So for those that might not be familiar, can you talk a little bit about that show? Are you setting up there?
I am setting up there. I have a table there that's in Westchester. So, I guess the last 2 years they set it up at a hotel. Well, actually last year it was set up at a college, community college. That didn't work out well. It was very hot, and all kinds of things went wrong with that. But the show itself was still a great show. And I guess in years past it was the Westchester Community. I'm not sure the name of the building it's in, but I guess it used to be there. It's going back there. There's 2 floors, and there's a lot of hype over this. A lot of hype. I know all these tables have been sold out for a while. I know people have been reaching out to me, looking for table space. Do I know anybody? That type of thing. So,
So
yeah,
Westchester, New York,
yeah.
East Coast National. How many tables do you know? Do you have an idea of how many tables there are? Are there there's like 500, I want to say. It's something big like that,
Yeah,
right?
so the upstairs is all booths, and I think the downstairs are single tables. I think that's how they did it. Uh, yeah, I think it's somewhere probably, because it's tough because there's a number of booths up there. I'm not sure how many tables in a booth, but yeah, so I think it's probably anywhere from, probably 350 to 500, I would say. Yeah.
So when you're setting up at those shows, when you're going to a big show like the East Coast National, hundreds and hundreds of table. There's going to be thousands of people there. There's going to be a lot of eyes on that show, a lot of foot traffic. What are your goals? What are your goals going into a show like that?
So we've talked about this before the national. I mean, to me, my goal is to sell football, right? To sell as much football as I can. I
So
did
you
it.
still have leftover football from the national?
I do, because it was really interesting at the national. I think all the football, except for I think 2 cards, anything $1,800 and under, they all sold. Everything sold except for 2 cards. For whatever reason, 2 cards didn't sell. But everything over 18, the 19, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, those cards never sold. And for me, a lot of people were trying to trade, and I just couldn't find anything that was worth it for me to trade out of the football to, something moving forward. So I still have a lot of those higher end cards, and that's my goal, is to bring those there, and move those cards, and start getting ready for the fall. I mean, sell and pick up. Yeah. I mean,
And
it should be a great buying and selling experience for me out there.
and you got to figure, right? Even though obviously there are people out there that are looking to always pick up and purchase four-figure cars, right? Four figures and or higher. But with prices going down the way that they have, say, opposed to 3 years ago, right? With prices going down the way that they have, the value of people's collections have gone down significantly. The value of their inventory has gone down significantly. So I think 2 years ago, when you were seeing, it would be nothing to have 10 or 15 cards in your case in the four figures, right? 1,000 or higher.
Yep.
And those things were moving like crazy. But now that the values have gone down, that means, I think, if you're looking at it on a big scale, that means that people's net worth have maybe gone down and the amount of money involved in their cards has gone down. So that does line up with maybe why some of your higher figure cards did not move at the national. Either that or they're the wrong cards. Either that or you're just stuck with the wrong cards, because if you have bigger cards that did not move at the national, that tells me that either people are really sticking to that comfort level of a three-figure card, like 1,000 and below, or maybe you just don't have the right cards. Which one do you think it is? Is it a combination or?
Yeah, well, I can tell you the cards are Mahomes, Burrow, Lawrence, right? So they're desirable cards. So they're not the wrong cards. A couple of the cards are very low pop and haven't sold for over a year and a half publicly, right? So say a card that I'm valuing at about $3,000 last sold at the beginning of 2022, right? For like $2,000 or $2,100, and people see that. I spent a lot of time at the National, and people were taking pictures of the card for like alt or whatever, and they'd be like, "Oh, this one just sold," and I'm like, "Well, check the date. That's like a year and a half. It was a long time ago." And they're like, "Oh," but nobody could really ever get to that point. And the people who really liked the card, who really wanted the card, and I'm talking about this one particular card, they would come with their case and start putting cards out, $100-$200 cards, and we're willing to say take 10 or 15 of these cards, and that's not where I wanted to be. I didn't want to take in more football, because football is what I was trying to get out of at the time, and there was nothing ever that really came up that I felt moving forward would be good for me to take in, that I can move. And I'm sure that it's going to happen. And I'm going to tell you two things too, because you were there with me. Where we were positioned at the National, I did very well. I know you did very well, but I think if we were positioned in another room, in a different place, I think we would have had even a better experience. I think more eyes would have seen these particular cards that I was moving, and I think I may have had more opportunity to move out of these cards. I
Well,
never
yeah,
got
we were in the corporate area, and the corporate area, I think, sounds good, and it was good to an extent because we had air conditioning the whole time. We had carpeted floors, so even though the corporate area was good to an extent, at the end of the day, yeah, if we were right in the thick of things, I mean, when I went out to go walk around, there'd be people 5 deep just trying to look over people's shoulders to see what the cases looked like. So, and we didn't have that kind of traffic. So, which to be honest, I was probably happy about, because I I think you were there more for like, okay, I'm selling these cards, I'm moving cards, and you got some big cards. Me, like we've talked about, over the last year and a half or so, I've really taken a step back from setting up. I've really taken a step back from just really moving inventory as quick as it comes. And I've really just kind of taken that money and taken it out, because I'm picking up PC cards, and I'm picking up cards that I really have no intention of selling. I probably have, probably 10 cards or so that are 4 or 5 figures. And I'm like, I'm not moving them. I don't want to move them. I have no desire to move them.
Mm.
And if someone twisted my arm to like give them a price, I'd probably give them double the last comp just to scare them off, because I really don't want to move them. And it feels good, for me to have these cards, and to, I talked about, when I came back from national this year, I talked about how I felt really hyper focused, and I found myself in this like meditative state at the airport, because I was waiting. I got there so early. I got to the airport like 3.5 hours before my flight, because I wanted to get there super early, because it was a Saturday. There was a massive convention going on. I had no idea what the airport was going to look like. So I got there really early. And I just found myself being like, okay, I really love the direction I'm going. And it was just me and my thoughts. And I'm like, I really love the direction I'm going. And I tell you what, even now, as a licensed therapist, someone that, really preaches meditation and preaches, mindfulness and sitting with yourself and silence, I probably don't do it enough, because when I did it at the airport, I was able to really sort out so many of my thoughts on life in general, and the hobby just plays such a massive part of my life. That's why I spent a lot of time thinking about my collection and the direction I'm going. And that's why I think I'm not going to the East Coast National with you, but I will be setting up at the Laz show in New Jersey in the first week of September. And the reason why I want to go there to set up is because I want to bring everything that like I have thousands of cards, just thousands, and I want to bring almost everything. I'm going to leave 100 cards home that I consider my PC. Everything else I'm going, and everything else I just want to have like a fire sale on. I want to get rid of everything, and then I want to put it in another big grail card. And then from there, I probably want to kind of start over and be like, okay, time to build up. I don't know if I want to call it inventory, but then I can start my spending again.
Yeah.
But I think I really do want to consolidate out of these boxes and boxes and boxes of cards that I find I have.
It's okay to outgrow your collection, right? It's okay, and I've done this how many times over the last few years where I've started with something and I've collected them, and then I've kind of looked at them and said, you know what? I think I'd rather be collecting something here or get a bigger card or do something bigger about my PC. And I take these cards and I move them, right? I go out, I sell them off, and then I'll use some of that money and I'll buy some more PC cards. And I bounced around doing that, a few times, just outgrowing certain things until I comfortably settled into who I really wanted to collect. And I'm happy about collecting. And not only am I happy about collecting, I'm really having fun meeting the people and being part of all these other groups of the same people who are collecting the same thing. So that's it. And I kind of saw that with you and your vintage group, right? And I used to think to myself, that's kind of my goal, is to kind of settle into a space where, you know, I could have my people that I can reach out to on a, Sophia Smith's card or a Trinity Rodman card or something like that. And I'm really finding my group now, and it's been fun.
That's awesome, man. And there's definitely a niche or niche.
Either way is correct.
There's definitely that niche for female sports, especially female soccer, and it really feels like you can get some of these cards a lot cheaper than I'm getting my PC cards for, which is really cool. And I tell you, the community part of it is so important to me because so my Eli Manning collection has really grown over the last 12 months, really grown. I've put so much time and thought and everything into this collection. It's continuing to grow. And but I did try getting a bunch of Eli collectors together and went in a, put there was like 7 of us, and I kind of put us all in a group chat and started up some conversation, and it just seemed like no one really wanted a part of it. It's like the people that were in the chat that responded to my initial post, no one was really responding. All they were doing was putting up their cards they had for sale, and there was no like real talk. There was no real like community about it. And I think I was like, maybe it's because I'm kind of comparing it to the community in the vintage world that I've really fallen into, because it really feels like the ultimate community. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening right now that are like, yeah, I have that community too. We have 90s basketball inserts group chat, and there's a ton of us in there. Or like you're talking about the women's soccer, or kind of like what we did with forming the Wolf Pack, right? It's all about trying to surround yourself with like-minded people that are happy for your successes. And that's a beautiful thing. And that can be hard to find sometimes.
Yeah. 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 No matter where you go in life, there's always people that are a little envious of everybody else around them. So it's nice. And I mean, I'm sure you find that in the hobby too, but I think it's nice that, the in our group and the groups and the people that I've been in, and not only, you know, being excited about my success, but, you know, being gifted cards that I probably couldn't even afford to buy, or may have not have even been for sale anywhere else. And 2 of the cards that I was gifted, I haven't even seen for sale. They haven't even come up for sale, right? Nobody's been selling them. So without being gifted those cards, I would have never been able. And that brings out a whole new part of the hobby, right? Because of course, what do you want to do when that happens? You want to start paying it forward, to somebody else in the group, and try to keep that going, that it's just I used to see you getting gifts all the time. I'd be, oh, that's really cool, right? And then all of a sudden I get a few gifts. I'm like, oh my God, I got to pay it forward. Somebody's getting something good today from me, like that type of thing. Because now I get so excited about it.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, the hobby is incredible. And one thing that you and I were talking about today, right? We were talking about how different like card Twitter is, and how different card Instagram is, and how different card YouTube is, right? It seems like there are these like fine lines that are drawn, and there's very little crossover. It feels like there's very little crossover. It's like you're either in the Instagram hobby, or you're in the YouTube hobby, or you're in the Twitter. Are they calling it X now? Is that the
X.
official name? Is it
Yeah, yeah,
X?
yeah. It's
And
X.
and I know that I think like Elon Musk like bought a company that was named X, so he's trying to change Twitter to X or something like that, right? But like, why would you ever name a product X?
It marks the spot.
I guess so. Is Elon Musk really going to be fighting Zuckerberg? Are they actually going to fight?
I saw that cage match, kid. That's gonna bring in some
Is that
money,
real?
and they said they had to postpone it, right? Because Musk has got some kind of injury, or he's got to work something out. Who knows?
I know. No, it's nuts. It's nuts for sure.
You
So
know, I not to switch it up a little bit, but I just want to say it's so interesting, being two of us really good friends. Kind of, you were in the hobby. I kind of followed in your footsteps, and here we are, years later, and how different we are in the hobby. Like even out at National, where I'm selling things, and it's like this almost like a business plan that I go in with, and I want to sell all this stuff, and I'm really not interested in going out and shopping. You're like, could you watch this? Like I'm going shopping. I can't hang around behind the table, right? And then you come back, you sell a few things. You're like, bro, I'm shopping now. I'm going shopping, where I'm like, I'm all set. I'm okay to go home cash heavy. So it's just funny, just thinking about how our journeys, where they've gone, and how I'm not going to say polar opposites, but our collecting is so different, but it's kind of the same. You went with Eli Manning, I went with Trinity Rodman, and kind of in my mind I just kept hearing those words you were echoing. If you're going to collect somebody, like, be in that top 10%, like be that super fan, or that super collector, or that person. And I never understood it then, but I kind of understand it now with Trinity Rodman, like where everything I'm doing, and I'm grading all these cards. Everything that's a 10, I'm keeping, right? And nines and under, they're it's a free for all. They're all for sale. So.
yeah, and I'll tell you, at the National, I did feel like I'm like in my head. Obviously, you and I, we know each other quite well, but I was still in my head like, am I like a terrible person to set up with? Because I feel like I'm asking you to watch my stuff just as much as I was actually there behind the table. But yeah, and you know what? It was definitely about going out and shopping, and trying to find some incredible cards. But I think for me more, it was just about wanting to go out there and really socialize.
Mhm.
I think that's a big part of what it was too. It was incredible being at the table, and meeting a ton of people, having people come up and say hello. But I really wanted to go out there and kind of be in the mix, and at the same time socialize. And then there were times when I found myself, I randomly bought two Michael Jordan rookies. They were both graded eights. And I'm like, I don't want these. I'm in Chicago, so I better move them today. So let me get out there. Let me go and try to shop these around. So, part of it, I think I kind of had a different motive every time for leaving the table, but it just seemed like motives kept on popping up. Um, and the thing too about being in that top 10% of like a player or an athlete collector, right? And I know I've talked about that with Hulk Hogan wanting to be in that top 10%. I'll tell you what, that's a pretty big pool. As crazy as that sounds, there's a lot of Hulk Hogan collectors out there. Drake's PC, who I see is in the chat, him definitely being one of them. But I feel like in this hobby, it almost feels like to truly get an identity, you do have to be a hardcore collector of someone or something. It's hard to not it's hard to get an identity when someone can't pinpoint, oh yeah, no, that's the guy that collects Peyton Manning. Oh, that's the guy that collects Eli. Yeah, yeah, I know him, kind of thing, because when you don't, you could be a collector of everything, kind of like I am with vintage. I'm definitely after my New York Yankees with vintage, but I'll collect anything that's iconic with vintage. And I think being able to narrow it down a little bit and shrink down like the hobby, so to speak, I think that helps people wrap their head around who you are, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm making sense there.
No, absolutely, absolutely. We do that all the time too. You'll say, "Oh, so," you're like, "Oh, he sells all the, the Brady's, or he's got all those Michael Jordan rookies." So we do the same thing. I mean, we describe people sometimes, at some of these shows or when we're referring to other people. But one of the great things about that too is when people know you're that guy, people send people your way, right? Which is the best part about that, especially if you're at a show. But now even on Instagram or something, if somebody, I know with Facebook and Instagram, if somebody puts up anything with women's soccer or WNBA stuff, somebody tags me right away, and says, "Hey, you might be interested," or whatever, So I'll definitely go look. And it's just like being at the shows too, where I say I have people that are out there that were sending me either Mike Tyson pictures or women's soccer or WNBA. They were sending me pictures from the national, and saying, at table, 530 or at table 722. So the cool thing about me is when I was saying to you, "Hey, could you watch my table? I want to run." I knew I was passing. All I was doing was going to either say the 7 whatever or 5 whatever. I was just going because I knew that's what the stuff I was interested in, and it was able to help me, have very limited time away from my table, but being able to go look at things that, I would be interested in buying. And one of the other things too about the show of our opposites is you don't mind going out and being 3 deep or 5 deep at tables, to look over people. You're a little bit taller than me. You're looking over people, and I just can't do that. Like that's why I love going to those shows early in the morning or at the end of the day when the crowd's out, and I can just get up and casually go look at. I'm just not a guy that's willing to be fighting with people to get up to look into somebody's case.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. And I think you were made to be behind a table. You were made to kind of be a dealer, and that's kind of who you are and where you've really excelled. I know you love the transaction. You love being able to just kind of move cards, and I love it. That's a beautiful thing. And and the thing is, though, I know you are a super social person, so I'm surprised you weren't really getting that itch to go out there and
You know,
really walk
everybody was
through.
coming to me, it was like that, you put it out there and you say, "Look, for how long?" We said, "This is our booth number." And, probably every 10 or 15 minutes, somebody was showing up to the table.
Yeah,
Sometimes they were showing up at the same time, right? So it's not like I didn't want to be social. I'm a super social person, and I
yeah,
love when people come talk and come see me. Come around the table, handshakes, everything. Let's grab a picture. That's stuff I love. It's just, you know, being in a crowded place, fighting people to go see something. I just, it's just not me. I don't know if it was, all that time in prison probably changed me, right? But all that time working at the prison, I maybe that's where it came from, because I don't remember feeling that way when I was younger. But as an adult, yeah, I'm happy to socialize. I socialize with anybody, but I just don't like fighting those crowds.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. So, to change the topic a little bit, real quick, let me ask you: as far as as far as your podcast goes, because you're what, on episode 120,
115. Yeah.
115.
Yeah.
So what direction do you feel like your podcast is going in, your show, your content? Because I know you do most of what you do is dealer perspective type stuff, right? So if you set up at a show, you will summarize the show. You'll talk about, the strategies and the thinking process that you had with certain things. You'll talk about like your inventory and different approaches that you're taking to either hold something, to move something, whatever the case. But do you see yourself just continuing down that lane? Do you see yourself pivoting at all? What kind of direction would you say you're going in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna keep a lot of the, figure out what works, keeping up doing a lot of that stuff. Also the point of view at some shows, right? So we have listeners from, I'd say all over the United States, but really all over the world. So there's listeners that can't come to a East Coast National or can't go to a Chantilly show or a Last show or things like that. So, you can get out there and you can talk about it and say, hey, try to describe the show, as best as, as I can, and, tell the story of the show and of how the show went. One of the things I promised after season 1, and I really didn't do it, and in season 2 and now season
Can
3,
I guess? Can I guess?
oh, you already said half the word already. So, but just
Bring it,
getting, go
bringing
ahead.
out more guests.
Yeah, just bringing on more guests and just being more comfortable with the interview process for me, which I am. Like I've started bringing some people on. I've got some other people that I've lined up from the national to come on, who have agreed to come on. So, yeah, just to bring on, people who I think have an interesting story, or we can just talk about things that the listeners are going to be, want to hear or want to listen to. You've really, I mean, I watch you do it. I watch you. I listen to you do this, and I always compliment you, and that's trying to learn from you a little bit on the interview process, which you're really good at, and that's my goal, is to hone those skills a little better.
Yeah, well, I definitely appreciate those kind words. And I look to others as well, so I look at other people and I say like, oh, I like how they do that, or I like this, I like that. And really I think, just in general, we're the sum of everyone we've ever come across in our life, right? For good, bad, or indifferent. And I think when it comes to content, I think you can almost say like you're the sum of everyone that you consume, because content can be a powerful thing, and I consume content, and so there are people that I look to as well. I take a lot of things from you as well and what you do on your show. So um, yeah, I think, for me, so I just crossed episode 200. In my head, I was like, I'm gonna have a big,
Woo!
yeah,
200.
I was like, I'm gonna have a big celebratory like
Yeah,
200th episode. Like this has been
great.
amazing. I've been doing this almost 3 years now with the show, and then literally episode 200 was during the national, and it was like, I'm not gonna stop doing like what I would normally do just to pat myself on the back.
Hmm.
Right? Like I'm not going to do that. So I barely acknowledged it and I just kind of kept going. Um what I will say is that recently, just this past Sunday was the first Sunday night that I stopped doing the PWCC Sunday night auctions. And I had a great conversation with PWCC, and I said, listen, and I didn't know how they were gonna, what they were gonna feel, what they were gonna say, because we have a, you know, we have we have a financial thing worked out, right? Where I get compensated, I get paid by them. So I said, I'm really not feeling doing the Sunday night auctions anymore. And I love them. I love the people. I love everyone that was coming into the chats every Sunday night. So thank you so much. If you're listening, if you're watching, thank you so much to all of you. There was a really solid core, 30 to 40 guys every single week that were in the chat. There'd be various people stopping and going and coming and whatnot. But for me, I could remember when I first started doing the PWCC auction, right, on YouTube, and one of the first nights I had to stop watching the Super Bowl in the fourth quarter because I had to go I had to go do this
I
PWCC
remember
auction,
that.
you
I
know,
remember that.
and I can remember there being barely almost anyone watching. Obviously, everyone's watching the Super Bowl,
Everybody's
and
watching the Chiefs beat the Eagles.
exactly, exactly. So then I'm looking at it, and really the Sunday night gig that I've had for quite some time, you know, through my YouTube channel, um, it started like it really dominated my Sundays, and I'll tell you why. Because I was going into about 11:30 at night. And in order to, and I have two kids, so I'm up every morning at 6, even on Sundays. So to get through the entire day, I would have to hope I catch a third wind. That's basically what it comes down to. I would have to hope to catch a third wind. So instead of that, what I would do is I would take a nap every Sunday. Every Sunday in the afternoon, I would take a nap. And it just like every Sunday kind of revolved around having to do that live, you know. And I know with the football season coming up, Sunday night football, like I want to be watching Sunday night football. And but I'll tell you what, I wouldn't have traded the experience for anything. So I'm still going to continue to do content for PWCC. It's just going to be in a new form. So I'm not going to be doing the Sunday night vintage anymore. Instead, I'm going to be doing some, you know, some social media content, which I'm super excited about. And so, you know, definitely looking forward to that. So that's just as far as like the PWCC gig goes. As far as like the show Sports Card Therapist, I think I'm just going to, you know, continue to do what I've been doing. And that is not really have a set format. I used to do it where I was like, okay, every Monday is my solo episode, every Thursday is my interview, every Monday is solo, Thursday interview. And I don't want there's no need for me to lock myself in that kind of structure, that kind of routine if I don't want to. And I think I've gotten feedback from listeners and watchers that are like, yeah, like I love not knowing what is going to happen on the show. I love kind of not knowing whether if it's going to be a solo, whether if it's going to be an interview. So, um, you know, I'm just continuing to do that, and I'm having a great time. And I tell you, the love I have for the hobby, the love I have for listeners, and anyone that consumes the content, however they do, it's you know, I couldn't say thank you enough. I could not say thank you enough. It's it's like it's just an incredible experience.
Yeah. I tell you, when we were out at the national, all the people that came to talk to us about, you know, the podcast and how much they like it, and then being recognized in the hotels and the trade nights and the elevators, things like that. It really changed, like, you know, and I talked about this on my podcast that you know, you're talking, we're talking into a camera, you know, and when I'm doing solo episodes, I'm here in my office talking to a camera for 30 or 40 minutes. And I see all the people who you know, the numbers, who's listening, but you really all of a sudden the faces start showing up and the people start talking to you, and it brings a whole new perspective to what you're doing. And when we were talking about coming back from the national with that glow, I came back more with a podcast glow than a hobby glow, if you know what I mean, than a card. No, I shouldn't say hobby, but a card glow, because I was just super excited just to meet so many listeners. And the people who are listening now, they'll know the second question I asked after I said I appreciate you listening is, where are you from? Right. And because my mind was just blown that people were from all over the United States. It wasn't like, you know, the people in Connecticut or the people I just see at local shows all the time. It was just people I've never even met before, somehow found the podcast and, you know, got hooked on it and listen every week. And I just couldn't be any more appreciative to all those people who not only were listening, but took the time to come find me at the national and say hello and shake my hand. You know?
Yeah, very well said, man. I echo those same exact things. I echo them for sure. So, well, we're at the 45-minute mark. So, Ken, any final thoughts, any final comments, anything you wanted to touch on before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited. I feel like, you know, they call the national the Hobby New Year, so I feel like this is the new year, the new hobby year. I'm super excited. I'm going through the calendar, figuring out the shows that I'm going to be doing. Got some big shows coming up. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to, it feels like almost an inventory reset for me, right? Because now I'm cash heavy, which most people aren't at this time of year, right? So I'm cash heavy. So I'm going to be going out, picking up some inventory, moving into the fall, putting more plans together because that's kind of who I am. And yeah, I'm super excited moving forward, not only for setting up as a dealer, but also for the podcast as well.
Yeah, yeah. Very well said, man.
How about you? How you feeling about coming into the new year?
Yeah, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling optimistic. I'm feeling like there's such a big lead up going into the national, and I mean like, months. It feels like months, right? Like there's, like that 90-day countdown and below is real. And now that it's kind of over, it almost feels like it's like this. It's a disappointment, it's a letdown, but it almost also feels like there's like this weight that's kind of been lifted off my shoulder, kind of thing. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. It's kind of like, okay, like I almost feel like I'm a free agent out there. Like, what can I do? Like, okay, I don't have to think about national for another year. Um, what can I do? Where do I want to go? What direction? And the thing is, too, with going to a show that size of the national, you're going to see so many people, so many cards that it's bound to plant mustard seeds in your mind in terms of possibly going in different directions. So I think there's probably a lot of people in the hobby that their watch list on eBay or their top 10 card wish list or their chase list probably changed up a bit after attending the national.
Mm. And it's going to change again, right? That's what's super cool about this hobby. And I said earlier, it's okay to outgrow some of your PC cards, right? And we know, I mean, between now and the real New Year's, right, which will be making top 5 lists again for next year, that if we made that list now and then made it again a month and another month, it would just keep changing every month, right? Because that's the cool thing about the hobby. You go to these shows or you're looking online, you see cards that you didn't know existed, or you see cards that look better than you ever thought. In your case with the vintage, the centering and the clarity and all this other stuff, you'll be like, oh my God, I have to have that card, right? And it just keeps changing, and that's what's just kind of cool about it. It never gets stale, it never gets old. It's always
Yeah.
changing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, man. Well, Big Ken, if people want to reach out to you, if they want to check out the podcast, they want to check out the show, how can they find you?
On Instagram at sportscard_lessons. You follow the link in the bio to everything. On YouTube, just search Sports Card Lessons Podcast. While you're over there, subscribe, like, hit the notification bell. And before I throw you into it, I know Mookie Chilson's in here, and he's going to understand when I say this. After this episode, bro, I think maybe $35 has got to go into that jar tonight.
All right, all right. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Yeah, and I'm Rob, sports card therapist, across the board on everything. So, Ken, thank you very much, man, for doing another collab episode. Now that the national run up is gone and the national hangover, we're slowly slipping out of. Hopefully, we can get back to our every 2 week collab episodes.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you, everyone in the chat. I know there's been a ton of comments in the chat, so we appreciate you guys. I see Jake, 90s B-ball cards, vintage card collector, Mookie Chilson, Tim, Orlando, a collector's dream, the loud collector, Troy, my man, Chad 77. I see Global, Richard Price in the house. Let's see, Paulie, James Lumen, Drake's PC, Mike Petty, Michael Ham. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and I guess that's it. So, Ken, you want to do your out?
Did you just
Outro.
forget yours? Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, be good to yourselves and everyone around you.
And take care of yourselves and your collection. Have a good one.
Take care, Rob.